Thank you. So what I will present is joint work of Juan Carlos Muñoz, who's not here, Ignacio Disnal, who's here with me, and myself. I will, well, yeah. So I will quickly describe Santiago for those of you who haven't been there, focusing on the urban segregation and income inequality issues, and how I will show you some results we have for maps, accessibility maps showing the access to opportunities. I will propose a new measure for access, incorporating quality of service and level of service, and I will show you some results and some conclusions. So Santiago is a large city, 640 square kilometers, a density of 8,000 people per kilometer. This is like 80% per hectares. It's a very, very segregated city. So between the we had a lot of slums in the city until the 70s, and those slums were relocated. Basically, they were expelled from the wealthier areas of the city, central areas of the city, to the periphery. First into slums that were located in the periphery, but then now we have no slums, we have like social housing with different degrees of quality, but it's social housing, most of it. And most rich people are concentrated in this cone in the northeast of the city, where you have 3 or 4 communes that actually accumulate all of the high income there. So, and this is how this cone looks like. So just to give you an idea, that tower over there is like the highest tower in Latin America. That's a very, very busy part of the city. It's where 3 of these rich communes actually meet. It's in the border of these 3 richest communes. So, as you can imagine, this is where most job opportunities are located. And as you can see, we also have a pollution problem. So Santiago Chile in general it's a very unequal country. We have the worst Gini coefficient of among OECD countries. At least that was the case in 2014. And 9.2% of the population live in what we define as poverty. And only 6% of this 9.2% is actually located in this rich part of the city. On top of that, we are having a constant increase in car ownership. We now have, on average, 1 car every 2 households. But if you look at if you divide this by income levels, you see that most of these cars are actually in households that have a high income. 50% of households do not have access to car, and they are, most of them, captive public transport users, okay? So a relevant piece of data for Santiago is that in 2007 we implemented this we already discussed, Transantiago. It was implemented in a big bang way, so until January of 2007 we have the old system, which was a semi-informal system, and in February 2007 Transantiago started. It was very, very difficult at the beginning. Nowadays it's working, and the main characteristic of Transantiago is it's a trunk feeder system. We actually, there was a tender, and we got 7 at the beginning. There were more companies, but now we have 7 operators running the buses in different areas of the city and some corridors. But the main characteristic of Transantiago was that it was going to use the metro. It was designed to use the metro as much as possible. So we are like it's like a not so rich family having a Mercedes. You want to use the Mercedes a lot, right? So before Transantiago, the metro was really, really lofty and mostly reaching high-income areas, and it was never crowded. Now it's crowded most of the time. And just to give you an idea, this is the modal split evolution. In 2001, we had 21% of trips made by car. Now we have 26%. What you see there, this BIP, and the red part of the cake, it's actually public transport. The Transantiago has a single fare and just one smart card for metro and buses. So BIP accounts for either metro or bus trips or combined metro and bus trips. And we have seen that this has also, the number of trips by bus or metro has been reduced, and that's something we are concerned about. Also, walking is decreased. Well, good news here is that bicycle actually went up a lot, and that's mostly explained by high-income people biking more, because low-income people is biking as much as before, but high-income people now, because of congestion, are realizing that it's much more efficient to go to work by bike. And you'll see why it's efficient for rich people to go to work by bike. Let me give you an example. This is Santiago. These are rough population numbers for some of what we would call the bedroom communes of Santiago. So we have in the west of the city these two communes that actually account for 750,000 of the population. In the south, we have 1.5 million people located in those communes. And in this high-income cone, in the northeast, we have 600,000 people, or more like 700,000 people. And in the 70s, the center was in the actual center of the city, what was the historical center of the city. It's still the center of the city. You still have like the main public offices there and everything. But we have seen as years go by that there's a tendency of this center to move following the rich people. Rich people, high-income households are trying to locate more and more towards the Andes Mountains. They're moving even up into the mountains, like trying to get away from the rest of the city, and the center is following them for obvious reasons. And now it's there, and we are really concerned that in the future we may be having the center over there. But what's happening is that many of these people living in these bedroom communes actually have to commute up to this center that has moved further away from them. And Santiago is a monocentric city. So now we have like an axis, but this axis is the main center of the city. So you don't see many sub-centers where you don't see a lot of trips going to other sub-centers. There are sub-centers, but they're not as relevant as this one. So what is causing this? First, land use planning instruments are weak in Santiago. So basically, the zoning system is it's easily changed. Any pressure, actually, you put a little pressure and you can change the zoning system. But depends on the commune, because we don't have an integrated land use and transport planning system. Actually, we have land use planning, transport planning. They don't talk to each other. The ministers are actually two different ministers, and the ministries do not negotiate anything. And the main issue is that we don't have a metropolitan authority. We have 37 municipalities or communes, each with their own mayor, their own budget, their own regulations. So rich communes have a lot of budget. If you go to Santiago, you go to this rich part of the city, it looks like Europe or the US. If you go to the other parts of the city, it looks like other places. And this is basically because of this administrative subdivision that doesn't make a lot of sense if you have a large city. And we have also very loose requirements for new real estate developments. We have something called conditioned urban development zones, which basically means that if you are a real estate developer and you have a big plot of land outside of the city, you can go there and say, you know what, I will build houses here. And the only thing the government requires for that is that you provide a road and that you make sure that there will be some, I don't know, supermarket and schools and stuff like that, but no public transport considerations for that. And it's basically, if you have enough money to build the road, you are set. And the other, oh, that's too bad. It's, well, there's the conditions so I mentioned it yesterday. Social housing is built by private developers, but the subsidy, of course, is coming from, it's public. But if you want to get this subsidy, you need to apply for a unit that has that fulfills certain set of conditions, which is being less than 500 meters for a public transport stop, but you just need one transport stop in 500 meters, and that's enough. Less than 1,000 meters from a school, but no considerations about capacity or quality of the school, and I think it's less than 2,000 meters from a hospital or a place where you can get like basic medical attention. So these are very loose, and on top of that, there's a glitch in the law that allows you to build, even disregarding these conditions. If you are in a rural area, you can just build social housing ignoring this. So the argument is that if you do that, you'll get, I mean, it's not very attractive because poor people usually don't have cars, but we see that poor people actually are having access to cars, and they're moving to this like very, very retired, far from the city, social housing, and they actually are captive car users, not public transport users. Well, the consequences of this are more or less obvious. We have low accessibility to activities in urban services. Travel time has increased a lot in lower income communes due to the peripheral location and due to this movement of the center of activities towards the rich people. This, of course, is a big impact in equity and social issues. There's a lot of segregation and exclusion, as I already mentioned. And this is just hard to overcome, or I mean, we cannot solve this problem by just like having good public transport, right? Because the distances are large. We need some land use regulation, but that has proven to be difficult to implement in our country. In our country, regulation is not something that we do very good. Our authorities are afraid of it. So what I will show you, this is a more or less classic accessibility measurement or indicator. We compute the sum of jobs or job opportunities in the whole area, and we sum them multiplied by a function of the generalized travel cost. So this is including travel time and cost. But as the fare is flat, the cost is, you can basically ignore it. If you do the same plot for car accessibility, it looks similar. I'm not showing it here, but it looks similar. An interesting thing here is that you see that if we use this accessibility indicator, accessibility is high in high-income areas of the city, which is obvious, but you see some more or less good accessibility along the metro lines. So this line you see going to the south goes actually 20 kilometers south of the city center. But still, at the end of that line, accessibility is, despite having a metro line, accessibility is not really that good because jobs are over there. So this is not solving the problem. So, well, this is income again. So you can see that the correlation between income and accessibility it's really, really strong. What we want to say is that this measure of accessibility, which is already not considered for any decisions in terms of what infrastructure will be built or anything, is not, even this one is, I mean, we would like that. But in order to do it properly, you need to account for something else. This is just accounting for travel time, translated to money. But travel time, we all know that it's not the same. The walking access time is not the same as in-vehicle travel time, or the number of transfers should affect heavily how you perceive your travel time. So actually, we want to correct this measurement to include all the how you say the quality of your trip or the level of service of trips. So we found that there is few research on this topic. Most studies focus only on physical accessibility, defined as walking accessibility to bus stops and metro stations. And the quality of service is usually not taken into account, and that's relevant for our city because, as you see in these pictures, in poor communes, the bus stops are poorly maintained, and although at the beginning they were all the same, in the poor communities they didn't last much, while in rich communities you get money from people who want to do advertising there, and they're much, the maintenance is better there. This is the same, basically. You see that places where public transport is much more needed because of the percentage of captive users have way worse quality. Thank you. That's Siri? This is not Siri, it's Google. Okay, Google. While you see that in rich communes, like in the one to the very right, we have, it's much nicer. So that's like an a big point where you get off the metro and you take buses and you have restaurants and it's really nice. While that will not happen in low-income places. So when you walk to the stops, it's also different. If low-income communes have barely have sidewalks and most of them they're not safe. They don't have trees. In the summer, this could be an issue in Santiago. It gets hot. While rich communes have very, very nice parks and nice sidewalks and all that. The environment in general is very different if you go to a poor commune or to a rich commune. And crowding. We want to account for crowding in our new accessibility measure, right? Because it's not the same to travel 1 minute in an empty bus than to travel in a crowded bus. And particularly for metro can get really, really crowded in Santiago after the implementation of Transantiago. Yes. The reliability is also an issue. We have a lot of bus bunching happening in Santiago, so people get really upset by this. They are waiting for the bus for like 10 minutes, and then they see 3 buses arriving at the same time. This is mostly due to the operators not being very careful about it, but also because of this. We don't have enough dedicated lanes for buses. And sometimes you have the dedicated lane, but cars will use it anyway. There's not enough control of what's happening there. So this is actually in a high-income area of the city. So all these are all things that we want to include in this like expanded accessibility measure. That this is a work in progress. So I'm not able to show you the maps right now, but I will show you an application to a couple of examples to just give you an idea. So you can compute physical accessibility, for example, from each point in space to the 10 closer transit stops. We use a logistic function and assume a certain speed of walking. We can calibrate this and find a physical accessibility. At the same time, we have something called it's an indicator built by the government where they send people to survey the public space, and this they actually go and write down. They report their perceived quality of space in terms of many things. They're like quality of the sidewalk, presence of trees, several things, how clean it is, etc. And they actually, it's a yes, no. Is it clean? Yes, no. Is the sidewalk in good condition? Yes, no. So if you sum all these binary variables, you can get up to 20, which would be like the highest possible value, or a low value. So if you compute physical accessibility to bus stops, it looks like the picture on the left. You see that this is more or less well distributed in the whole city. And actually, in the high-income areas, this is not so good because you see less bus stops in high-income areas. But if you compute this quality of your walking trip to the bus stop, you see that high-income areas, again, are, of course, the ones where you see a better environment. So you see, these maps are quite different. So if you're going to make a decision in terms of policy, you should, we believe you should account for the map on the right as well. And if you actually look at this, here we aggregated the values by commune. And if you look at the top 6 communes, these are more or less high-income communes. They account for 21% of commuting trips. They generate 21% of commuting trips, and they have an average level of service of 13, while this, the communes on the bottom with the star, they actually are lower income communes, and they have a 9.63 indicator of level of service. So this is actually a good picture of how unequal in terms of public spaces and quality of public spaces our city is. So what about public transport, not just how you walk there? So we have this example. This is not real, but usually you could see this, that you have 2 trips that have the same total travel time, but they are composed of different elements in terms of waiting time, walking time, number of transfers, the comfort. And if you use the typical accessibility measures, you have travel time, and travel time is 25 minutes for both. But we know that if you have to transfer once or twice, you perceive it to be much longer. If the we got a problem here. So we want to incorporate this quality of service into accessibility measures. Data is coming from observed smart card transactions. We have the data set of all the transactions for like a year or more. And we want to account for disaggregated total travel time, distinguishing between waiting, walking, and in vehicle. And we want to include a penalty for bad quality of service in terms of crowding, unreliability, and transfers. There's a lot of literature in this. So we have we know that, for example, in the UK, walking time is 1.6 times the in-vehicle travel time, according to several studies. We usually have this crowding multipliers in the bottom. You see that they can actually make perceived time up to twice as long if you are in a very crowding vehicle. And there are several ways. Transfer also can add penalties to your penalties. You can include penalties in terms of travel time to you if you, or perceived travel time if you have transfer. And there's a lot of literature measuring this. So what if we take these values, some values we selected for Santiago, and you apply to 2 trips? For example, here we have a trip going from a mid to low income area to the city center, and a trip coming from a rich area to the same spot in the city center. We can do it by metro, either by metro or bus, in both cases. And here we have the actual attributes of each trip by bus and metro. We selected these 2 examples because they have very similar travel times, 31 and 32 minutes, but they're quite different in terms of distance, walking time, comfort, reliability, etc. So if you actually convert these values into using this expanded measure of time, you will get that the trip going from Las Condes, which is a high-income area, to the center is actually 49 equivalent minutes, while the one coming from San Miguel, which is mid to low income, it's 71 minutes. So we observe that level of service is poor for lower income places, and we want to actually emphasize that by using this measure. So conclusions. There's clearly Santiago it's very unequal city, we have several issues. We have an urgent need to address problems of land use and transport planning. Of course, that's clear. It's not easy to do, but we have to do that. The problem with communal budgets and distribution, it's a main issue because of course you will have nice public spaces where property taxes are high. I mean, I mean, the tax is the same, but the property values are higher in high income areas. So municipalities have rich municipalities have a much bigger income. And we need to invest in public transport quality, accounting for this. If you account for the quality of services, you can actually include the effect of the environment and urban infrastructure, we believe is very relevant, and the effect of the level of service of the transit system itself. Some recommendations, actually these are recommendations for us, for our government, but we're trying to make them think about this. If you're going to evaluate transportation projects, cost-benefit analysis, by the way, in Chile we have a long tradition of good quality cost-benefit analysis. We have our nice four-stage model that works fine. But cost-benefit analysis is not enough. You do cost-benefit analysis in a highway connecting the rich area of the city with the airport is great, while, I don't know, a bus corridor is really bad. So we need something else. We believe this to include accessibility and equity indexes. So think about a Gini index for the distribution of accessibility in different parts of the city. That's something we would like to see. And if you're going to measure accessibility for equity purposes, you should consider also the quality of service and the user's perception. And this is a bigger challenge. Land use planning should encourage new subcenters. But how do we do this? We don't know. We have been trying to do this. Actually, the original plans of the city had several subcenters along the main road ring, the ring around the city, but they have never really worked. So we were discussing, if you ever see a spin-off company of our faculty generates a lot of spin-off or like new companies, and you never see them located in these subcenters. They all go to where the rich, towards and that's an indicator. So it's really hard to do. We haven't managed to do that, not by regulating, not even with sticks or carrots. No, there's no way to, so far we haven't been successful here. And we have some questions. So we have a constant increase in motorization rate. More and more people is leaving public transport, either because it's slow, and Transantiago didn't help, at some point. And the question is, should we focus on trying to benefit captive users? Or should we just discourage car use? Or can we do both? And how do we do both? Or should we allow people to do whatever they want and provide the required infrastructure? So should we let people, move as far as you want, and eventually I will build a highway for you? I believe the second option is not very sustainable. So, but still, this is something we are debating. These are really, really controversial debates on media and politicians. Some believe that you should let them do whatever they want and provide afterwards. Some believe that you should regulate a little bit and try to find social optimals. And another question is, what should we deal first? Should we deal with waiting time, with comfort, with reliability? Which changes? Some things are really easy to tackle, and some are really hard to. So, but the balance between how easy it is to improve and how relevant it is something that we need to analyze. And we would like to actually put the effort where the impact is more relevant or stronger. And this is a big question. Are we still in time to revert the poor or lack of land use policies from the last 4 years? I wish I could say yes, I really don't know. And that's it. Thank you very much.